a world carved from the petrified bones of forgotten gods, mana is not a gift, but a sentence. It bleeds through the fractured continent like a river of liquid starlight, a current of pure potential that nourishes the ambitions of empires and slakes the thirst of the abyss. Here, power is not earned through virtue, it is torn, screaming, from the fabric of reality itself, seized through the divine right of ancient bloodlines, or mastered through the forbidden whispers of the devouring arts, the sorcery that feasts upon the very essence of life. In this age of encroaching shadows, guilds stand as monolithic titans, their banners casting long, dark shapes over kingdoms built on compromise and fear. Their politics are a subtle venom, seeping into the heart of the world, poisoning treaties and crowning kings. And within this brutal, unforgiving order, a young man named Kaelen once dared to dream. His spirit was a bright, untarnished flame in a world drowning in shades of grey. He was a prodigy of the Aegis Covenant. His talent for mana manipulation, a raw, untamed storm, awaiting a master to give it form and purpose. His heart burned with a fierce loyalty, a belief in the guild's creed of order and justice that was as beautifully naive as it was tragically pure. He saw his comrades not as colleagues, but as brothers sworn in arms. His guildmaster, the imposing Lord Valerius, was not a superior, but a father figure, a paragon of unwavering strength and profound wisdom. Kaelen's future was a tapestry woven with threads of sun-gilded glory, a path leading straight to the guild's hallowed inner circle, where he believed he could truly stand as a shield for the innocent and uphold the fragile balance of their fractured realm. He fought with a passion that bordered on reckless abandon, his blade a blur of silver light against the darkness, his nascent spells crackling with untempered ink. Every grueling mission was a testament to his unshakable faith. Every hard-won victory, another stone laid on the foundation of his noble aspirations. He was the Covenant's rising star, their symbol of a brighter tomorrow, a warrior whose spirit promised to one day guide them into a new era of peace and prosperity. But in a world built upon secrets and sustained by sacrifice, the brightest flames are often the first to be extinguished. The summons arrived at dusk, the sky bruised a violent purple and bleeding orange over the guild's towering obsidian spires. Lord Valerius himself had a task for him, a mission of the utmost importance, deep within the jagged peaks of the Greyfang Mountains, a place where the veil between worlds grew thin and ancient, volatile energies festered like an open wound. It was a profound honor, a sign of implicit trust that made Kaelen's heart swell with pride. He was to lead a small, elite team, his most trusted friends, to secure a volatile mana nexus, a wellspring of immense power that they were told threatened to detonate and destabilize the entire region. He saw only the mission, the glorious opportunity to prove his worth, blind to the cold, calculating gaze of the man who sent him. He did not see the way Valerius' fingers steepled beneath his chin like a predator in repose, nor did he notice the faint, cruel smile that touched his lips as Kaelen and his brothers in arms departed into the fading light. The mission was a lie. The Nexus was not unstable. It was a trap, a ritualistic altar primed not for containment, but for a cataclysmic sacrifice. As Kaelen and his team reached the heart of the Nexus, a cavern pulsating with an eerie, silent power, the ancient runes carved into the stone flared to life. They did not glow with the clean, protective light of warding magic, but with an unholy, blood-red incandescence that seemed to drink the very air from their lungs. The ground shuddered, a low groan rising from the bedrock, and the atmosphere itself began to scream as the Nexus detonated. It did not explode outwards, but inwards, collapsing reality before unleashing a wave of pure, corrupt mana that vaporized the mountainside and scarred the heavens with a lingering stain of violet corruption. Kaelen, shielded at the last possible second by a desperate, instinctual barrier of raw will, was thrown back like a discarded doll. His body was broken, his mind reeling from a psychic shockwave that felt like his soul was being torn in two. When he struggled to his feet amidst the smouldering devastation, the air thick with the taste of ozone and incinerated rock, he found the smirking, pitiless faces of his own brothers-in-arms. Their blades were drawn, not against some phantom enemy, but against him. The accusation came swift and sharp, a poisoned dagger to his soul. Betrayal, sabotage, heresy. He was being framed, the perfect, celebrated scapegoat for an atrocity designed from the beginning to fuel Lord Valerius' dark and labyrinthine ambitions. He fought, his movements clumsy with shock and a grief so profound it felt like a physical weight. But he was outnumbered, his spirit already shattered. They beat him down with cold, practiced efficiency, the faces of his friends now twisted into masks of contempt. They stripped him of his guild insignia, the silver griffin he had sworn to honor with his life, and shattered his sword, the very symbol of his oath. He was declared a traitor to the realm, a monster, single-handedly responsible for the deaths of hundreds in the Nexus cataclysm. Dragged before a silent, condemning crowd at the city gates, their faces a sea of judgment and hatred, he was cast out. Thrown from the towering city walls, he tumbled down the embankment and was left to rot in the desolate wasteland known as the Ashen Scar. His screams for justice, raw and ragged, were swallowed by the indifferent wind. His honor was reduced to dust, his life a flickering ember about to be snuffed out by the encroaching dark. The Ashen Scar was a graveyard of hope, a sprawling expanse of cracked, pale earth and petrified, skeletal trees beneath a perpetually grey, sunless sky. Here, mana was not a river of life, but a toxic whisper, a miasma of decay that twisted everything it touched. The only creatures that survived were things born of corruption and endless hunger. Kaelen lay broken, his lifeblood staining the pale ash-like soil, each breath a shard of glass in his lungs. His life was seeping away, a slow, warm drain into the unforgiving ground. Memories, brilliant and agonizing, flashed before his closing eyes. The shared laughter of his comrades around a campfire, the proud, paternal nod from his guildmaster after a successful mission, the promises of a future that had been meticulously crafted and then stolen from him. Despair was a cold, heavy shroud, suffocating the last vestiges of his will to live. And as the sweet, silent embrace of oblivion beckoned, something stirred in the deepest, most primordial recesses of his soul. It was an ancient, predatory emptiness, a cosmic hunger that had slumbered for eons, waiting. It was a vestige of a primordial devourer, a creature of myth, a legend whispered to frighten children into obedience. But it was real, and after millennia of starvation, it was ravenous. As Kaelen's life force dwindled to its final, flickering spark, this entity lunged from the void. It was not a gentle passing, but a violent, agonizing consumption. His soul was torn asunder, shredded into countless fragments, and then brutally woven back together with the dark, insatiable threads of this ancient being. The pain was absolute, a supernova of agony that incinerated his old self, burning away every last trace of the naive boy he had been. In that blinding, silent flash of non-existence, a chillingly sterile interface bloomed in the darkness of his mind's eye. Cold, blue letters burned through the void, dispassionate and absolute. Host soul integrity critical, merging with primordial vestige. Dormant system awakening. Synaptic symbiosis initiated. Welcome, host. The Devourer System is now active. He was no longer dying. He was being reborn into a living nightmare. Consciousness returned, not as a gentle dawn, but as a thunderclap that shook him to his core. Kaelen gasped, his lungs convulsing as they filled with the acrid, chemical-tainted air of the wasteland. The wounds that should have killed him, the shattered ribs, the punctured lung, the deep lacerations were gone, sealed by scarred flesh that felt alien and tight against his bones. But a new wound had opened, one deep within his very being, a gnawing, ravenous hunger that defied all reason. It was a physical ache in his gut, the spiritual void in his chest, a relentless, primal craving for something, for life, for essence, for more. His senses were ablaze, raw and overloaded. He could see the faint, sickly trails of corrupted mana leaking from the petrified trees like spectral sap. He could smell the distant rot of a carcass half buried a mile away. He could hear the frantic, terrified heartbeat of a small, skittering creature hiding in the rocks nearby. A low, guttural growl rumbled from behind a jagged outcrop of grey stone, and a scarhound emerged. It was a skeletal canine, its bones held together by sinew and shadow, its eye sockets burning with glowing red embers. Corrupted saliva dripped from its bony jaws, sizzling as it hit the ashen ground. In his previous life, such a creature would have been a minor nuisance, dispatched with a single, clean strike. Now, disoriented and grappling with a monstrous new reality, it was a lethal threat. Yet as it charged, a blur of bone and malice, instinct took over. Not his old, trained instincts as a knight of the Covenant, but something deeper, more ancient and primal. A predatory grace guided his movements, his body coiling and uncoiling with a speed and fluidity he'd never possessed. He didn't block, he dodged the lunge, flowing around the attack like smoke. His hand, now ending in fingers that felt unnaturally sharp, plunged into the creature's side. There was a sickening crunch of dry bone and corrupted flesh, and the beast fell limp, its inner light extinguished. It was then that the system's voice, cold and dispassionate as a winter's sky, echoed in the silent theatre of his mind. Host has neutralized a low-tier lifeform. Devour? The hunger inside him roared in affirmation, a beast demanding to be fed. Hesitantly, he placed his hand on the dead hound. A torrent of dark, ethereal tendrils, like living shadows, erupted from his palm, wrapping around the carcass. It withered in seconds, the flesh and bone desiccating, turning to a fine grey dust that was swept away by the wind. A stream of faint, grey energy, visible only to his new senses, flowed from the dust into him. The gnawing hunger abated, just a fraction, replaced by a surge of raw electric vitality. And something else. Essence devoured, skill, feral instincts passive, assimilated. The world sharpened even further. His hearing became more acute, his sense of smell more precise. He could feel the vibrations in the ground through the soles of his feet. The monster's primitive, honed survival senses were now his own. Kaelen stared at his hands, then at the dust that was once a living creature. This wasn't a second chance. It was a curse. A monstrous new existence, defined by an endless, insatiable appetite. The wasteland offered little sustenance, and the hunger soon returned with a vengeance, a constant, clawing presence at the edge of his sanity. He survived on the meagre life force of corrupted vermin and withered, dying plants, each act of devouring a grim, nauseating reminder of the abomination he had become. Soon, however, a different kind of prey found him. 3 figures, clad in the familiar dark leather of the Aegis Covenant's shadow assassins, crested a dusty ridge, their forms silhouetted against the perpetually overcast sky. They were here to confirm his death, to sever the last loose thread of Lord Valerius's betrayal. Their leader, a man whose cruel face Kaelen vaguely recognized from the guild halls, sneered, his voice laced with casual contempt. "Look what the Scarhounds dragged in. The great traitor, still breathing. Lord Valerius will be pleased to know we're finishing the job properly this time." They were mages, their hands already crackling with destructive energy. A barrage of shadow-laced fire lanced towards him, screaming through the dead air. The old Kaelen would have erected a mana shield, a technique of pure, stoic defense. The new Kaelen, guided by the Devourer's feral instincts, dove, rolled, and came up sprinting. Not a soldier, but a predator, closing the distance with terrifying speed. The assassins were caught completely off guard by his raw, explosive velocity. He was on the first one in a heartbeat, his movements no longer the disciplined, elegant forms of a knight, but the brutal, efficient strikes of a born killer. He shattered the man's concentration with a vicious blow to the throat, and as the assassin choked on his own spell and blood, the system's insidious whisper filled his mind. Devour! This time, there was no hesitation. The dark tendrils lashed out, and the man let out a horrifying, soul-shredding scream as his life, his mana, and the very fabric of his memories were ripped from his body and funneled into Kaelen. High-grade humanoid essence devoured. Skill, shadow dagger, active, assimilated. Fragmented memories acquired. The 2 remaining assassins stared in abject horror. This was no broken, dying exile. This was a monster from the darkest tales. Through the chaotic storm of the stolen memories, Kaelen saw a fleeting, crystal-clear image. Lord Valerius, his face calm and unreadable as polished marble, giving the order. Ensure nothing is left. His very existence is an inconvenience. The cold, black fury that filled Kaelen was a fuel more potent than any mana. He was their inconvenience. He would become their nightmare. Using the newly acquired Shadow Dagger skill, he conjured a blade of pure, solidified darkness and blurred into the fray. The fight was a whirlwind of desperate, panicked spellcasting and brutal predatory violence. He took a searing hit to the shoulder, a lance of holy fire that felt like molten steel, but the pain only sharpened his focus, feeding his rage. He devoured the second assassin, then the third, gorging on their life force, their skills, and the damning proof of their orders. The hunger was sated, for now, replaced by a chilling, absolute clarity. He was no longer just a victim. He was a hunter, and his hunt had just begun. With each soul he consumed, the Devourer System evolved, and Kaelen's understanding of his curse deepened into a terrible intimacy. It was not merely a tool for gaining power. It was a sentient parasite, a consciousness of immense and ancient cunning intertwined with his own. The memories he absorbed were not clean data points. They were chaotic. Emotional fragments that threatened to overwhelm his identity. He tasted the blind loyalty the assassin felt for Valerius, the quiet love a consumed bounty hunter held for his distant family, the feral terror of a in its final moments. These echoes of other lives swirled within him, a tempest of conflicting emotions that chipped away at the foundations of his sense of self. The system, he learned, was a double-edged sword of terrifying sharpness. The more power he assimilated, the more potent the Devourer's own will grew within him. The hunger was its primary weapon, a leash and a whip. If he starved it, it would begin to feed on him, on his memories, his humanity, his very soul, until nothing of Kaelen remained but a mindless, consuming vessel, an automaton of cosmic appetite. He was waging a constant, silent war, not just against the world that had wronged him, but against the very source of his new, terrifying strength. One night, huddled in the wind-scoured ruins of an ancient temple, he dared to delve into the deepest, most primordial memories he had absorbed, those of the Devourer itself. He saw not a single entity, but a lineage of cosmic predators stretching back to the dawn of creation. He witnessed entire worlds turn to lifeless dust, vibrant stars extinguished like candles, and beings that called themselves gods consumed and forgotten. And in that terrifying abyss of cosmic history, he learned the system's most terrible secret. It was not a random anomaly. It could only awaken in a soul that had been pushed to the absolute zenith of despair. A spirit so profoundly shattered by betrayal that it created a hairline crack in the fabric of reality itself. A crack just wide enough for the Devourer to seep through. Lord Valerius had not just tried to kill him. His act of ultimate betrayal had, in a stroke of cosmic irony, forged the very weapon that would seek his ruin. Kaelen was not chosen. He was simply broken enough to become a gateway. Now, armed with a grim and singular purpose, Kaelen began his long, clandestine journey back towards the heart of the kingdom. He moved like a phantom through the underbelly of society, a ghost haunting the fringes of civilization. He became a whisper in the dark, a rumor exchanged between mercenaries in dimly lit taverns and thieves in shadowed alleyways. The man who devoured souls. His name, once a symbol of honor and hope, was now a mark of abject terror. But his growing, fearsome infamy did not go unnoticed. One rain-swept evening in a grimy, salt-crusted port town, he found himself cornered not by guild assassins, but by something far older and more resolute. They were the Soul Wardens, a clandestine order dedicated to purging abominations that threatened the natural cycle of life and death. Their leader, an old woman with eyes that seemed to hold the weight of centuries, met his predatory gaze without a flicker of fear. The stench of consumed souls clings to you like a shroud, child, she said, her voice calm but laden with an unshakable, ancient resolve. You are an anomaly, a wound in the world that must be cleansed. They were not driven by malice or greed, but by a sacred, unwavering duty. They saw him not as a man seeking vengeance, but as a plague that would, by its very nature, inevitably consume everything it touched until only it remained. Their fight was not one of hatred, but of cosmic necessity. Kaelen found himself clashing with warriors who moved with an eerie, silent grace, their weapons glowing with a pure silver light that seared his corrupted flesh and made the devourer within him recoil. For the first time since his rebirth, he faced an enemy that his raw, devouring power could not easily overwhelm. The Wardens were not strong in the conventional sense of brute force. They were precise, their techniques designed specifically to sever unnatural connections, to purify corrupted essence, to enforce the fundamental laws of existence. They were a threat on an entirely different axis, forcing Kaelen to realize that his quest was not a simple, linear path to revenge. He was now a player in a much older, more dangerous game, with rules he was only just beginning to understand. He escaped, but not without a cost. A deep gash from a silver blade that refused to heal. A constant, burning reminder of the new, implacable enemies he had made. The wound from the Soul Warden's blade festered, a source of constant, agonizing pain that the Devourer's regenerative abilities could not mend. It was a poison, not of the body, but of the soul, a brand of pure order on his chaotic essence. Weakened and plagued by a creeping doubt, Kaelen stumbled upon a small, isolated village, cowering in the shadow of a corrupted forest. A monstrous beast, the creature warped by the same dark energies Valerius had unleashed at the Nexus, was preying on them. He saw the stark terror in the villager's eyes, a mirror of the helplessness he once felt. And the last, stubborn flicker of his old self, the desire to protect, stirred within him. He decided to intervene. The battle against the twisted monstrosity was a brutal, desperate affair. The beast was a mindless engine of destruction, a mass of tentacles, claws, and gaping maws. Kaelen, hampered by his spiritual wound and the gnawing hunger that was growing more insistent by the hour, was forced to draw upon more of the Devourer's power than ever before. He pushed himself to the very edge, his control over the parasite fraying. He defeated the beast, tearing it apart in a final, explosive frenzy of claws and shadow. But as he stood over the twitching corpse, the hunger surged, a tidal wave of pure, ravenous need that drowned his reason. He lost himself. The villagers watched in frozen horror as the man they thought was their savior fell upon the creature's carcass. Dark tendrils erupted from his body, consuming its foul essence with a ghastly, slurping sound that echoed through the unnatural silence of the forest. When he finally looked up, his eyes glowing with an inhuman, predatory light, he saw not gratitude, but primal, unadulterated fear. They poured a judgment that cut deeper than any blade. He had saved them, but they saw only the abomination he had become. Crushed by the weight of their rejection, he retreated back into the wilderness, the devourer's hunger sated, but his own soul starving. Was he truly any different from Lord Valerius? Was he just another monster, using a righteous cause to justify his own insatiable appetite? For the first time since his rebirth in the Ashen Scar, Kaelen truly felt alone, lost in a suffocating darkness of his own making. Hiding in the deepest parts of the corrupted forest, teetering on the precipice of utter despair, Kaelen came to a terrifying realization. Fighting the hunger was a losing battle. Suppressing the devourer was allowing it to dictate the terms of their symbiosis. To survive, to win, he couldn't fight it. He had to master it. He had to become a more intelligent predator. His hunt changed. No longer did he consume randomly for sustenance. He began to plan, to strategize. He used the fragmented memories he'd stolen to build an intelligence network inside his own head, painstakingly piecing together the vast web of corruption that Lord Valerius had spun across the kingdom. He targeted specific individuals, corrupt nobles funneling money into the Aegis Covenant's dark projects, rogue mages practicing forbidden arts under Valerius's tacit protection, high-ranking knights who had knowingly participated in his betrayal. Each target was a calculated choice, a source of specific skills, crucial information, and a deliberate step closer to his ultimate goal. With each soul he devoured, he evolved. He learned to refine the assimilation process, to erect mental barriers that allowed him to filter the memories, absorbing the skills with flawless precision, while casting the dross of emotion and identity aside. He assimilated the art of stealth from a master assassin, becoming one with the shadows. He absorbed the subtle arts of courtly manipulation from a disgraced duke, learning to read intent in the flicker of an eye. He stole the knowledge of ancient runic circles from a heretical sorcerer, understanding the language of power itself. His body began to change. The corruption of the devourer, no longer a disfiguring mark, but a source of streamlined, terrifying power. Faint, dark markings, like elegant flowing script, traced paths across his skin. His eyes held a permanent, otherworldly glow, and when he willed it, shadows would cling to him like a second skin. He was no longer reacting to the world. He was imposing his will upon it. The broken boy, left to die in the Ashen Scar, was gone forever. In his place stood an apex predator, a calculating engine of vengeance, sharpening his fangs for the throat of the man who created him. His power now honed to a razor's edge, Kaelen set his sights on the crimson spire, a key fortress of the Aegis Covenant, and, more importantly, the very place where he had taken his sacred oath of loyalty years ago. The symbolism was a bitter, poignant irony he intended to savor. He didn't sneak in. He walked through the front gate in broad daylight. The guards who tried to stop him were consumed before they could even sound the alarm. Their life force reduced to a silent, shimmering mist that he inhaled. He moved through the fortress like a spectre of death, each step a deliberate desecration of his own past. He passed the training grounds where he once sparred with laughing friends, the great hall where he shared meals with his brothers, the quiet sanctum where he had prayed for the strength to protect. Now, he brought only silence and fear. The fortress's elite guards, the Crimson Blades, a unit famed for their unbreakable shield formations, were deployed. Kaelen shattered them. He moved through their ranks like a phantom, his every strike a death sentence, his devouring tendrils lashing out to feed his ever-present hunger. The massacre was a message, a declaration written in blood and terror, and it was received. In the fortress's central command chamber, a shimmering portal of silver light tore open the air, and the image of Lord Valerius materialized. He looked down at Kaelen, standing amidst the carnage, not with anger, but with a chilling, almost academic curiosity. "Remarkable," Valerius' voice echoed, smooth as polished stone. "The vestige chose well, a vessel with such tenacity." He showed no remorse, no fear, only the detached interest of a master artisan examining his work. "Could you truly believe your downfall was born of simple malice, boy? You were a sacrifice, a necessary one. The power you now wield is a chaotic, primordial force I have been trying to harness for decades. Your exile was meant to be an experiment, and I must say, the results are exceeding all my expectations." His words were meant to break him, to reveal Kaelen as nothing more than a pawn in a game he couldn't comprehend. But they only stoked the inferno of Kaelen's rage. "I am not your experiment," Kaelen snarled, his voice a low growl that was no longer entirely human. "I am your reckoning." He unleashed a torrent of condensed shadow and a dozen devoured skills, a chaotic storm of stolen power that ripped the projection to shreds. As the image of Valerius dissolved, his final, mocking laugh echoed through the chamber. The fortress was his. The message was sent. The hunt was no longer in the shadows. It was time to aim for the king. The final confrontation took place in the Aethelgard Grand Cathedral, the headquarters of the Aegis Covenant and the heart of its power. Kaelen arrived under the blood-red moon of a festival night, a lone, dark figure walking toward a sanctuary now twisted into a monument of sacrilege. The cathedral's hallowed halls were desecrated, the sacred mosaics obscured by pulsing, sickly runes, the air thick with the metallic stench of sacrificial magic. Lord Valerius stood waiting at the main altar, no longer a projection, but a figure of immense and terrible power. In his hands, he held a scepter crowned with a pulsing black crystal, a contained fragment of Devourer essence, the very source of his dark research. "You've finally come home, Kaelen," Valerius said, his voice dripping with condescension. "Ready to return the power you stole?" The battle that followed was not a clash of swords, but a war between two opposing philosophies of consumption. Valerius was a master of control, wielding his sliver of the Devourer's power with cold, cruel precision, shaping it into lances of annihilating energy and shields of impenetrable darkness. Kaelen was a force of nature, a maelstrom of raw assimilated abilities, a chaotic symphony of 100 different fighting styles and schools of magic. The cathedral groaned and shattered around them as spells of shadow and corrupted light tore through ancient stone and priceless stained glass. Kaelen fought with a fury born of betrayal. But Valerius was a master strategist, anticipating his every move, turning his own stolen powers against him with contemptuous ease. He pushed Kaelen back, step by painful step, cornering him. And then he unleashed his trump card. Valerius slammed the base of his scepter into the altar, activating a hidden, grand ritual circle that covered the entire cathedral floor. A geyser of pure, unrefined, corrupt mana erupted from below, flooding the chamber. It was too much. A raw overdose of the very energy Kaelen's system fed on. His body convulsed, his senses overloaded, and the devourer within him roared in a frenzy of agony and ecstasy. The power surge was a fatal poison. Kaelen's vision blurred, his strength failed him, and he collapsed, his consciousness plummeting into a lightless, silent abyss. He awoke, not in the ruined cathedral, but in a void, a prison within his own mind. Before him, a shape coalesced from the endless darkness, a colossal, ever-shifting shadow with 1,000 whispering mouths, and a single burning eye that was the colour of a dying star. It was the primordial devourer, the true consciousness of the system, manifest in its terrifying, ultimate glory. Its voice was not a sound, but a pressure, a psychic weight that threatened to crush his very identity. "Your body is merely a vessel, Kaelen," it boomed, the name a mere label for its temporary shell. "You have been a useful instrument, but your role is at its end. True control lies in absolute surrender. Give me what is mine." Suddenly, the void was filled with a torrential flood of images, feelings, lives. He was drowning in the memories of every soul he had ever consumed. He felt the assassin's first kill, the cold steel, and the warm spray of blood. He experienced the noble's decadent pleasures, the taste of rare wine and the touch of silken sheets. He saw through the scholar's eyes at the moment of a world-changing discovery. He felt the soldier's dying breath as he bled out on a forgotten battlefield. He lived 1,000 lifetimes in a single agonizing second. He felt the ancient, cosmic loneliness of the devourer itself, its eons-long journey through the void, its all-consuming hunger for existence.